All right, let's dive into one of the big ones. We're talking about a book that is famously difficult, often misunderstood, and incredibly influential. Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Now, this isn't your typical philosophy book. It doesn't really argue with you, it just declares things. It's not trying to explain an idea so much as create an experience. So together, we're going to unpack its powerful and sometimes dangerous ideas.
So here's the game plan. First, we'll talk about why this book has a reputation for, well, breaking people. Then we'll get into the heart of the problem he's trying to solve, this idea that God is dead. After that, we'll look at the seriously demanding answers his prophet Zarathustra offers. Then we get to the ultimate test, what Nietzsche thought was his heaviest idea. And finally, we'll explore why the book's surprising ending might just be its most important lesson. Okay, so let's get right into it. What is the deal with this book? Why has it fascinated and frustrated so many people for more than 100 years? Well, it's because it's not trying to be a normal philosophy book. It's designed to throw you off balance right from the very start. I mean, Nietzsche himself told us what we were in for. He called it a book for all and none. And that paradox is really the key. On the surface, it's written like a story, kind of like a religious text. Anyone can pick it up. But the real meaning, that's for none. Or, for the very, very few who are willing to do the incredibly hard work of actually thinking for themselves. So instead of a step-by-step argument, you get these wild stories, poems, and prophecies. Nietzsche wants you to feel the problem he's seeing in the world. But here's the thing. That dramatic style also made it super easy for people to twist his words into something awful. And the most infamous example, of course, is the Nazis. They took his ideas and warped them to justify their ideology of racial purity. Something that Nietzsche, who absolutely hated nationalism and anti-Semitism, would have found completely disgusting.
So, what was this massive crisis that Nietzsche felt so strongly? Well, it all boils down to what is easily his most famous and misunderstood statement.
God is dead, and we have killed him. Now, this was not a triumphant shout. It wasn't a, hooray, we're atheists now. For Nietzsche, this was a catastrophe. He wasn't just talking about his own personal beliefs. He was making a massive observation about Western culture. Think about it. For more than a millennium, Christianity was the bedrock of everything in the West. Our morality, our sense of purpose, what was right and wrong. But by Nietzsche's day, science and Enlightenment thinking had chipped away at that foundation until it was basically gone. People were still living in the house of Christian values, but the ground underneath had completely eroded. Nietzsche's great fear was, what happens when everybody finally looks down? He saw total collapse into nihilism, the terrifying belief that life is meaningless. And this is where the character of Zarathustra comes in. He's this prophet who comes down from his mountain retreat to tackle this exact crisis. But he's not starting a new religion, no way. He's offering a blueprint for how an individual can totally transform themselves. He describes this journey with this amazing metaphor. First, he says the spirit is like a camel. It kneels down and takes on all the heavy burdens of tradition. It lives by the words, thou shalt. Then, to gain freedom, the spirit must become a lion. It has to fight the great dragon of old values and roar, I will. But a lion can only destroy, it can't create. So the final step is to become a child. Innocent, forgetful, a new beginning. The child says a sacred yes to life and creates brand new values, not out of duty or anger, but out of pure, joyful play. Zarathustra says that all of humanity is basically in this same state of transition. We are a rope stretched over a giant canyon. On one side is the animal we came from. On the other is a future potential he calls the Übermensch, or the overman. And right now, we have a choice to make. We can either slide backwards into what he calls the last man. This is the ultimate picture of mediocrity. A person who just wants comfort and safety, who avoids any real challenges. They blink and say, we have invented happiness. Or we can try to become the Übermensch. This is the individual who constantly overcomes themselves, who creates their own meaning from scratch, and who embraces every part of life, the good, the bad, all of it, as part of their own creation. Now, the fuel for this whole process is something Nietzsche calls the will to power. And let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. This has nothing to do with dominating other people or political power. It's the basic drive that he thought existed in all life, the drive to grow, to expand, to overcome obstacles. And in a human being, it's the will to achieve mastery, but first and foremost, mastery over yourself. And that brings us to what Nietzsche himself called his most profound idea, the heaviest weight. This isn't really an argument, it's more like a terrifying thought experiment that's designed to put your whole life to the test. So imagine this. What if, someday or night, a demon were to sneak up on you in your loneliest moment and say, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy, every thought and sigh must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence." What would you do? Would you throw yourself down and curse that demon?
See, this isn't a physics theory. It's a gut check. Your reaction tells you everything about whether you truly love your life. If the thought makes you despair, it means you're really just putting up with this life, hoping for something better later on. But if you could look that demon in the eye and joyfully shout, "Yes, let's do it again," well, that would mean you affirm your life, completely, flaws and all. And that total love of your fate, that's the ultimate goal. That's the mindset of the Übermensch. But here it is. Here's the final brilliant twist in this whole book. After Nietzsche lays out all of these world-changing ideas through his prophet, he then shows us that Zarathustra completely fails. He convinces almost no one. No, seriously. He gets laughed at, people misunderstand him, they just ignore him. His own followers don't really get what he's talking about. He keeps trying different ways to teach them, and it just doesn't work. And this constant failure, it's not a mistake in the storytelling. It is the story. It's the entire point. So why does he fail? Well, Nietzsche is showing us a pretty brutal truth. Most people don't actually want the crushing burden of creating their own values. When Zarathustra warns the crowd about the comfortable, pathetic last man, they shout back, "Give us this last man." They want comfort, not a difficult path to greatness. And even the few people who follow him are just looking for a new leader to tell them what to do, which is the exact opposite of his message. The failure is the message. Becoming this new kind of human is a lonely, ridiculously hard path that most people will just say no to. So, in the end, Thus Spoke Zarathustra doesn't give you a nice, neat set of answers. It's not a self-help book. It's a challenge. It holds up a mirror and leaves you with the biggest question you can face in a world without absolute truths. Are you going to be the one who creates your own values, or are you just going to wait for someone else to hand them to you?